I recently built a straight edge that I made for my circular saw, and in this video I'll be adding a fence and some rails I can use for clamps to make my cuts. Now this fence I had back from the last video, and what I'm doing right now is just adding a chamfer to the bottom, so when I make my cuts the dust doesn't collect at the back of the fence, and I can make straighter cuts without the buildup of the dust. Now with this fence ready to go, all I do is attach it down to my board. And what I'm going to be doing is lining it up just using the initial cut that I made with my circular saw. And I have to draw a pencil line just to make sure that it's straight and perpendicular to my original cut. Now that I have the fence line in place, what I'm doing now is just pre-drilling the holes just to make sure that my plywood fence won't split. And then when I pre-drill the holes, I'm also adding in a countersink bit just to make sure that everything lines up flush. Now with everything good to go, the next thing I have to do is just drill in the screws to lock the fence down to my board. And the drilling these in don't take too long. I have everything clamped down to make sure the fence doesn't move in this process. And I'm also going to double check just to make sure that everything is still square once I have all these drilled in. Now I double checked that nothing moved and nothing budged out in this, so I think everything's very good to go. I'm just going to make a few test cuts to make sure to have everything straight and that the fence is straight so I can use these to make proper cuts. I decided to test out with 3 different cuts, and you can see from this video that these cuts line up perfectly. They're all virtually the same size. I even took out my caliper and measured them, and they were off by 0.001 millimeters, so it's safe to say that this is pretty straight and I have a straight edge I can finally use. Now I'm putting in the T-track for my clamps. So what I have to do first is I have to cut out a test piece just to make sure that the T-track can fit in a 1/2 inch of plywood. And now with my test piece, I'm just marking down a line, and I have to get 3/8 inch so I can fit this T-track in. And now I'm using my router just to cut out the slot length just to make sure everything fits and nothing will be flimsy when I put it on my crosscut sled. Everything seemed good to go, so now what I'm doing is just testing out with the clamp. These are how I'm going to clamp down my boards with the T-track inserted into my crosscut sled. Now we just have to line everything up, and what I'm doing right now is just laying out where I want the T-track to go, making sure they get as close as possible to the saw without touching it, and then I'm just making a few marks with my pencils to make sure I have everything in place. Then I'm going to use a straight edge to make sure I have straight lines so everything is lined up, and my clamps can reach the board so I can get every cut nice and straight. So I'm just using a 1/4 inch router bit to make these cuts, so I have to make a few passes on it. Right now I'm just changing out my chamfering bit. I'm putting this bit so I can have all my cuts. And then testing it out with the straight edge to make sure that everything is lined up with the cut, and I can proceed in making my cuts for my router base. I finished cutting my first slot and it was just a bit too tight, so what I'm doing is just sanding down the edges to make sure I get a form fit. And with this ready to go, I can actually test it out and see if it fits. I have to sand it down a little bit more because it's a little bit too tight, but now I can proceed in making the other cuts. I got too excited when I was making the middle cut, and you can see I made a bit of a mistake, but it doesn't really matter, I can cover it up if I wanted to. Now to attach the T-track to the bottom, I'm just using a 5-minute epoxy, so all I have to do is just put the epoxy out on the board, mix it up a little bit, and apply this to the T-track, and then it'll be secured for good. And now my T-Track's all secured in place. Just don't look at the middle cut. It doesn't exist. It's never there. And now I can attach the clamps on so I can test these out with a few cuts. And now we have the new straight edge machine to make a whole bunch of cuts. And there's one last thing I'm adding to it, so just stay tuned for that video. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later.